I've gotten a hold of the global version of the Honor Magic V5, which is, as of right now when I'm filming this video, the world's thinnest foldable smartphone. Well, not exactly, since the thinnest technically is only the ivory white version at 8.8mm when folded and 4.1mm when opened up. The one I've got here is the Dawn Gold version, which actually is a tiny bit bigger, of around 0.1 to 0.2mm. But it's still ultra slim, extremely powerful and filled with specs that outright shouldn't be possible in such a small body. So let's peel back the layers and find out just how incredible piece of technology this smartphone actually is. When I saw the phone for the first time, I immediately noticed that the crease had gotten slightly less noticeable from the previous version. But I also know from experience that as you use the device more and more, it becomes a little bit more noticeable. So it's probably gonna end up being about the same amount as the Honor Magic V3. Maybe a little bit better. The phone is a bit more squared off this time around, which you'll quickly notice when you hold it in your hand. As always with all of Honor's smartphones, it comes with a screen protector on right out the box, which is extremely nice, so you don't have to fiddle with that later on, because I'm not good at putting screen protectors on. The biggest exterior change that you'll notice on the phone is for sure the way bigger camera bump on the back of the phone. It kinda makes the phone seem a lot more premium compared to last generation's V3. But I'll get into the actual camera improvements later on in the video. Even though the phone has gotten slightly bigger, they've still managed to remove about 5 grams of weight, so it now only weighs 217 grams. Ivory white version again. It really isn't something you'll notice in daily use, but it's still quite impressive, especially since the camera bump has become so much bigger. I do really like the rounded camera element that a lot of these Chinese manufacturers make. It really just makes it seem a lot more like a real camera, and it also contributes to the fact that you can lay down your phone on the table without having it wobble. Well, it'll still wobble when you fold it out. What is even more impressive is probably the fact that the hinge has gotten significantly more durable and should now last up to 500,000 folds. And though I don't have any way of testing if that claim holds up, I can easily tell that when you slam the two screens together, it seems to dampen much more and feels much more like closing a book softly. It also seems like the edge that keeps the two screens from touching each other has been slightly raised, which is probably so some bigger pieces of dust and dirt can lie between the two screens and not damage the screen. The hinge also doesn't seem to pull the screens together as much as the previous version, but it is still gonna slam them together though. Another big deal is also that it now has IP58, IP59 water and dust resistance like the Vivo X Fold 5, which was the best resistance on a foldable smartphone until it just got beaten by the Google Pro Fold 10 with IP68. But don't get me wrong, it's still great. Whether you like the design of the slightly more rounded right side edge or not, it does make for a great experience in the hand when you're right-handed or when you're using it unfolded. I'm not sure if I do actually like the change of moving the volume rocker to the same side as the on-off button or fingerprint scanner, because I actually really liked having it available on the left side when unfolded. But it does kind of make more sense to have it on the right side, since it also appears on the right side on the software itself within Magic OS. The colorway is either gonna be something you're gonna love or hate. I do really like the new Dawn Gold color a lot, even though I'm often more of a silver, white or black guy. But the finish is just extremely nice and really make the device seem a lot more of a premium device. And I also really like that Honor includes a cover in the case, so you don't have to buy that separately. And the feature of being able to place it down anywhere because of the circle around the camera is just magnificent. And something I use all the time when I'm out of the house and have the case on my phone. Because at home I don't have the case on, because I really do like the bare bones look and small form factor. The displays on the phone is also top tier in every aspect because they are now the exact same 120Hz LTPO OLED display on the outer as well as the inner display. They also have 100% DCI-P free color gamut with 1/17 billion color, so very color accurate and very colorful, which is gonna help a lot if you want your photos displayed as intended, or if you're gonna edit photos in, for example, Lightroom Mobile, which I do sometimes. The peak brightness is 5000 nits, but I suspect that to be only with HDR content like the previous model. The Honor Eye Care and PWN dimming features are always amazing since they essentially always help you with eye strain and eye comfort. Something I've praised them for with every unit I've had the pleasure of checking out. It might not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but I actually really had a big issue with sleeping when I was daily using an iPhone. But ever since I switched to Honor's devices and turned on these features, I have no problem watching something on my phone right before bedtime. I usually also get very car sick when I sit in the back of a bus or a car, but here the new motion sickness feature has actually helped me a little bit. So now I can actually use my phone when sitting in the back, which I of course could do as well before, but now I just don't get as nauseous. So that's a really nice feature. If you have an Honor pen, then you also have the ability to use that on the display as well. So that's also super nice. The V5 now has a Snapdragon 8 Elite chip inside, which essentially make it a lot more power efficient and improves performance by quite a bit. As I mentioned in my review of the Honor Magic V3, I really didn't notice any difference at all between the Honor Magic V3, which runs on Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and the Honor Magic 7 Pro, which runs on this Snapdragon 8 Elite chip. So if you have the previous Honor Magic V3 and expect the V5 to run a lot better, don't expect that. In daily use, it doesn't seem to be all that different. What is different for sure is the battery life, because it now comes with a significant bump from 5150 to 5820 milliamp hours. And then with a more efficient chip, it's for sure noticeable. Silicon carbon batteries might not last as long, but damn, it's amazing. They have such a high capacity. I have no problem at all sustaining a whole day of battery, and even if I need some juice to my device, it's also not a problem at all, since it can charge wired with 66 watt and wireless with 50 watt, like the previous V3 also could. I haven't gotten around to get a wireless charger that supports that amount of charging yet, so as of right now I'm just using it wired, and within like half an hour it's filled to 40-50% from zero. So in like an hour's time it's at 100% again. But you do have to be aware that it does get hot when supercharging with 66 watt, and it is also gonna damage your phone a lot faster. So if you intend to have a great battery for a very long time, maybe ease up on the fast charging. Okay, as mentioned earlier, the camera on the back has now received a pretty significant upgrade, which is highly appreciated in my opinion, because I often feel like this is where most foldable phones kinda end up falling a little bit behind. But the main 50 megapixel f1.6 lens and the 20 megapixel f2.2 front cameras haven't received any improvements. However, the telephoto and ultrawide has gotten some neat upgrades. The telephoto camera is now a 64 megapixel f2.5 up from a 50 megapixel f3 on the last generation. But more importantly, in my opinion, is that it's now a 1/2 inch sensor instead of a 1/2 5.1 inch sensor, so it has gotten bigger. This also causes it to start at a 3x zoom instead of a 3.5x zoom, which is quite normal when the sensor becomes a little bit bigger. So it might not be easy to tell, but it does capture a little bit better photos now and in sharper resolution as well. So you have the ability to crop in even further in post-production. The ultra-wide has also gotten a slight upgrade by now offering a 50 megapixel f2 aperture up from 40 megapixel f2.2. This might also be because of a slightly bigger sensor, but I haven't been able to find any information on that anywhere, and I also don't see any difference at all. All the cameras support up to 4K 60 FPS, so sadly no 4K 120 FPS this time around, but I guess that's fine. I do, however, really like the new portrait film simulations that essentially is a look to your photos, like what you can get with something like this Fujifilm X100V that I have right there. I just find it kinda sad that it isn't available in the normal photo mode, or even in the video mode. I feel like that's a little bit of a missed opportunity. What I do really like is the Pro mode and the fact that you can shoot in log, so if you want to more manually color grade your footage, you can do so. I gotta be honest, I had hoped for some bigger improvements to the camera, but it's definitely getting closer to a regular sized phone's camera very soon. The sensor sizes are starting to get close to something like the Honor Magic 7 Pro's camera system though, which is super nice to see. Within the operating system, you'll find a few multitasking features like the split screen, where you can have two apps running simultaneously, and then you can actually also stack it with a third screen on top. But in general, the miniature screen that you can lay on top of the other apps is something I don't find particularly helpful. So I actually just tend to completely stay away from using that. The split screen feature is, however, super nice and extremely helpful whenever you have the screen unfolded. I've often been on a shoot for a client and ended up having an overview of my shot list and answering a text at the same time, so it's extremely useful. Since we're in the AI era right now, then you'll of course also find some AI features in the operating system of this phone. And the two most useful features are the Google Gemini Assistant and the circle to search feature. I came from an iPhone before I switched to Honor's devices, and I gotta be honest, I never used Siri. Simply because it sucked, couldn't answer anything, and could also not do anything. But the story is completely different with Gemini, which you always have available by sliding a finger up from the lower right or the lower left side of the screen. It understands context relatively well and doesn't often miss with the information that it gives to me. So it's great to have available always within the operating system. But when I tell you that circle to search is on a whole other level, you gotta believe me. Because this is for sure my most frequently used feature on this phone and the previous. And I don't know if I could live without it anymore. Whenever you find something that you want to know more about, it's as simple as just holding down on the bar in the bottom and circling the subject. Then it'll make a Google search. Back in the day, I would have to search for so long if I didn't know specifically what I had to search for. But with this, it's so easy to search up anything. Even just using it within the camera app is great. So if you see something in the real world that you want to find on the internet, it's as simple as doing the same just within the camera app. So just pointing the camera at something and just circling around what you see through the camera. It simply is just the most useful AI feature out of all of them. What I don't use as much as I should is Honor's own Magic Portal feature. And the reason for that might be more simple than you think. You see, within the apps, there's always a share button of some sort. And I don't really feel like I need to send stuff elsewhere in another way. And that kinda also makes me forget about the feature altogether. So though the idea is great, I really don't see that many use cases for it. So I can probably count on one hand the amount of times that I've used the Magic Portal. I haven't used any other folding device, so no Samsung Z Fold 7, no Vivo X Fold 5, and not any Pixel 10 Pro Fold. So comparing this device to them is gonna be really hard for me. But I can for sure tell you that the 4400 mAh battery and the way higher price point from the Z Fold 7 would be a huge deal breaker for me. It should really be a polished device for me to consider that. The Pixel 10 Pro Fold is also probably gonna feel like a brick compared to either the Z Fold 7 or the Magic V5 because of the 40 more grams and the much thicker size. So I wouldn't consider that either. And then though the Pixel 10 Pro Fold and the Z Fold 7 have a great main wide angle lens, the telephoto and ultra wide really suffers a lot, whereas the V5's is now amazing. And I actually tend to use the ultra wide the most, so that would also matter a lot to me. So all in all, I do think I would choose the Honor Magic V5 over the two other options because of these features. Because apart from that, they're actually quite similar. Here's my pros for the device. I love that you get a cover in the package and that there's a screen protector on out of the box, so I don't have to buy that separately afterwards. And the way the cover just fits perfectly and follows and protects the hinge is just an amazing design. What does make it extremely great is without a doubt that you get a thin and lightweight phone with a huge amount of battery life and extremely fast charging. That's actually over twice as fast as most of the competition. Great cameras with bigger sensors is also huge, since this is somewhere a lot of the previous foldable phones have fallen a lot behind. A peak brightness of 5000 nits is also huge, since it makes it much easier to use outside. And it really doesn't matter much in the big picture on battery life, since the battery again is so huge. So having this higher brightness, yeah, you wouldn't notice that it uses a lot more battery. The much stronger durability also matters a lot for people who might be a little more rougher with their devices than someone like me. But anyway, not having a break on you or start bending over time is always highly appreciated. So here's my cons list. Why I think a lot of people would choose differently is because of the software, with its quirky features like the magic portal and the window on top of an opened app. But apart from those features, it's actually very similar to that of an iPhone. Even down to the dynamic island when playing music or having a YouTube video running on the TV, and just the notification center and control center where you go back. Everything is just very iPhone-like, even the widgets. It does also need some polishing regarding messages, because it's quite often that I notice an app like Snapchat doesn't send the message through to me, or maybe I wouldn't get a messenger message, which can be quite annoying. And it also doesn't have the app drawer on by default, so you have to turn that on manually. But that's not such a huge deal. But since it runs Android, you do still have a lot of customizability, so some of it you could just change with apps or in the settings. So it's not such a huge deal. Sometimes apps crash or black out and you have to remove them from the quick access menu. And social media apps also have a tendency to show low quality content sometimes, but it comes and goes. The thinnest foldable phone is much more of a marketing scheme than anything else, especially since it's only the ivory white version that's the thinnest. So I feel like they maybe should have changed something within the phone so every color would have the same specs at least. Maybe not give it such a great camera or such a great battery, and then actually have all the devices be the same size. I do, however, not mind that the bump on the back is much thicker now, when it delivers much better camera performance. Thumbs up in that department from my side. I do, however, know that this is somewhere where a lot of other people complained, but to be honest, every foldable have a camera bump and most of them are big. So why do you care that much? I would much rather have a great camera and a bigger bump rather than a smaller camera bump and a shitty camera. It might just be me, I don't know. The biggest con is probably that it isn't available for purchase in a lot of places around the world. But here in Denmark, where I live, it is available. The design and build quality is on top of the game this time around and is really hard to beat. It really feels like a premium device with noticeable less flex in the hinge and a much more sturdy build with as close to no crease as I've ever seen. The display looks spectacular both inside and outside, and 95% of things you do runs smoothly. The battery and charging solution is just immaculate and is absolutely without doubt some of the best on the market right now, at least for foldables. Image quality from the camera is also just top tier for a foldable phone, but I do feel like their own AI features does need some work to go ahead and become great. So overall, I'll actually give it a 4.8 out of 5 stars because it's really just on top of the game, in my opinion. And I really think that a lot of people would be extremely happy with their purchase if they chose an Honor Magic V5. Yeah, this was all. I'm out.